Release it to God. The moment you let go, miracles start. In more than 40 years of studying the subconscious mind and the spiritual laws that govern human experience, I have observed a truth so simple that most people overlook it, and so powerful that once understood, it changes everything. The moment you truly release your burden to God, not with trembling lips, not with hidden fear, not with secret doubt, but with genuine surrender, miracles begin to unfold in ways you could never have arranged through effort alone. Most people pray, but they do not release. They ask, but they do not trust. They say, "God, take this problem," while gripping it tighter in their thoughts. They affirm abundance while rehearsing lack. They declare faith publicly while nurturing anxiety privately. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Let me tell you something that may surprise you. It is not your desire that delays the miracle. It is your attachment. It is not your prayer that goes unanswered. It is your constant interference with the answer. You see, the subconscious mind is the channel through which divine intelligence expresses itself in your life. It responds not to your words alone, but to your dominant feeling. When your feeling is fear, it accepts fear as the instruction. When your feeling is trust, it accepts trust as the command. And the outer world reflects whatever you consistently impress upon that deeper mind. I have counseled thousands of people through heartbreak, financial collapse, illness, business failure, and personal despair. And again, I have witnessed the same turning point. Not when they tried harder, not when they forced belief, but when they finally said, "God, I release this completely. I trust you." There is a sacred moment when the struggle stops. A quiet shift in the heart, a softening of the mind, a realization that you are not the architect of the universe. In that moment, the tension dissolves. And when the tension dissolves, the channel opens. The law is simple. What you resist persists. What you surrender transforms. I recall a businessman who came to me during a severe financial crisis. His company was drowning in debt. Lawsuits threatened his reputation. Employees were fearful. He had not slept peacefully in months. Every day he prayed for rescue. Every night he imagined bankruptcy. "Dr. Murphy," he said, "I pray constantly, but everything is getting worse." I asked him gently, "When you pray, how do you feel?" He hesitated, terrified. There was the answer. He was asking for abundance while emotionally affirming disaster. His subconscious mind was being impressed not with faith, but with fear. The deeper mind cannot respond to contradictory signals. It acts upon the dominant impression. I instructed him to do something radical. I told him to stop praying for success. Instead, I told him to pray for peace, to release the entire business into God's hands, to say each night before sleep, "Father, I give this company to you. If it lives, it lives. If it closes, it closes. I trust your wisdom completely. I am at peace." For the first few nights he resisted. Letting go felt like failure. But gradually something shifted. The desperation softened. He began sleeping deeply for the first time in months. The anxiety in his voice disappeared. Within weeks, unexpected negotiations opened. A competitor offered a partnership instead of pursuing legal action. A debt restructuring proposal was accepted that had previously been rejected. New clients appeared through referrals he had not sought. The miracle did not begin when he tried harder. It began when he stopped interfering. Release does not mean indifference. It means trust. It means recognizing that divine intelligence knows pathways your conscious mind cannot conceive. It means acknowledging that the same power that keeps the stars in their orbit can manage your finances, your health, your relationships. There was a young woman who longed desperately for marriage. Every date felt like a test. Every conversation was analyzed, every silence interpreted as rejection. She prayed daily for the right partner, yet radiated anxiety. I asked her, "Do you trust that God knows the perfect time?" She replied honestly, "No. I feel like I'm running out of time." That fear was the very vibration blocking the love she desired. Love cannot flourish in the soil of desperation. I instructed her to release the entire concept of marriage for 30 days. To stop searching, to stop analyzing, to say each morning, "Divine love knows my heart. I release my need to control when and how love appears. I trust completely." The first week was uncomfortable. She felt idle. But slowly, she began to enjoy her own company. She cultivated gratitude for her present life. She found joy in friendships, hobbies, quiet evenings. And then something natural happened. Without effort, without pursuit, she met someone through an ordinary introduction. At a gathering she almost declined. There was no anxiety in her voice this time, no urgency. Just peace. That peace allowed connection. Miracles often enter through ordinary doors. But we miss them because we are staring at the door we prefer. The subconscious mind is like fertile soil. When you continually dig up the seed to check its progress, you delay the harvest. When you plant it, water it with faith, and leave it undisturbed, growth becomes inevitable. Release is not weakness, it is alignment. The ancient scripture says, "Be still and know that I am God." Stillness is not passive, it is receptive. In stillness, you are not pushing against life, you are allowing life to flow. Let me tell you about a father who feared constantly for his son's safety. Every news report of danger increased his anxiety. Every late phone call sent his heart racing. He prayed obsessively for protection. Yet his constant worry was poisoning his peace and influencing his household atmosphere. I explained to him that fear is prayer in reverse. What you imagine repeatedly with emotion, the subconscious accepts as a command. I encouraged him to replace fear with calm trust. Each night he would say, "God's protection surrounds my son. I release my anxiety. Divine order governs his life." The first time he said it, his voice trembled. But he persisted. Over weeks the fear subsided. The household atmosphere softened. The son, who had felt suffocated by anxiety, began communicating more openly. Their relationship improved. The constant tension dissolved. Release does not only change circumstances, it changes you. And when you change, the world responds. You must understand something deeply. The miracle is not created outside of you. It is allowed through you. The moment you surrender, you remove the resistance that blocks divine expression. There is a profound psychological truth embedded in spiritual surrender. When you hold tightly to a specific outcome, your nervous system remains in a state of contraction. Contraction limits perception. You overlook opportunities because they do not match your rigid expectation. When you release, your nervous system relaxes. Relaxation expands awareness. In expansion, you see possibilities previously invisible. I have seen healings occur after years of failed treatments when a person finally said, "If healing comes, I receive it gratefully. If not, I trust God's plan." That acceptance dissolved internal conflict. The body, which had been under constant stress, shifted into restoration. Stress blocks healing. Peace permits it. There was a teacher who struggled with chronic migraines for over a decade. She had tried medication, diets, therapies. Nothing provided lasting relief. She lived in fear of the next episode. I asked her to stop fighting the migraines. Instead, to bless her body. Each time pain arose, she would say, "My body knows how to heal. Divine intelligence flows through every cell. I release this struggle." Within months, the intensity decreased. Within a year, the migraines were rare. What changed? She stopped resisting her own body. She stopped viewing it as an enemy. She surrendered to the healing intelligence within. Release restores harmony between conscious and subconscious. Harmony invites order. Most people are afraid to release because they confuse it with loss of control. But consider this: how much control have you truly had while worrying? Has anxiety solved your problem? Has obsession accelerated your miracle? Control is often an illusion sustained by fear. Surrender is not giving up your desire. It is giving up your anxiety about the desire. Let me share a story from my early years. I once faced a period of professional uncertainty. Invitations declined. Opportunities slowed. I felt the creeping voice of doubt whispering, "What if your work no longer matters?" For weeks I attempted positive thinking. I forced affirmations. Yet underneath, there was tension. One evening, exhausted from mental struggle, I sat quietly and spoke aloud, "God, if my work continues, let it continue. If it ends, let it end. I trust you entirely." The relief that followed was immediate. Not because my circumstances changed instantly, but because I stopped wrestling with them. Within days, a new invitation emerged, not merely a replacement for what had been lost, but an expansion beyond what I had imagined. That opportunity led to further doors opening in ways I could never have planned. Divine intelligence rearranges circumstances with precision beyond conscious comprehension. You must understand that the universe does not respond to force. It responds to alignment. When you release, you align. When you align, you receive. There is a difference between hoping and knowing. Hope still carries uncertainty. Knowing carries calm assurance. When you release something to God with knowing, not frantic pleading, you activate a deeper law. Imagine holding a heavy object tightly in your hands. Your muscles strain, your arms tire. The longer you grip, the more pain you feel. But when you place it down, the weight remains, yet it no longer burdens you. Surrender is placing the weight down. Some miracles manifest immediately, others unfold gradually, but the internal miracle, peace, occurs at once. I once counseled a mother whose child was facing serious medical tests. Her anxiety was overwhelming. She prayed constantly, but slept little. I encouraged her to say, "Divine love governs my child's body. I release fear. I accept peace." She practiced this in the quiet before sleep. The peace that replaced panic allowed her to support her child with strength rather than fear. The test results eventually showed improvement, but even before the results came, she had regained calm. That calm was the true miracle. The external outcome followed. You cannot experience faith and fear simultaneously in equal measure. One must dominate. Whichever you nourish will grow. Release is nourishment for faith. Let me speak plainly. If you are obsessing, you are interfering. If you are repeatedly replaying worst-case scenarios, you are instructing the subconscious to magnify them. If you are checking constantly for evidence, you are affirming doubt. Trust operates quietly. There was an elderly man who longed to reconcile with his estranged brother after 20 years of silence. He wrote letters that went unanswered. He rehearsed conversations in his mind daily. I told him to stop trying to engineer the reunion, to release resentment and expectation. Each night he would say, "I forgive completely. I release this relationship to divine harmony." Weeks passed. One afternoon, unexpectedly, his brother called. A mutual acquaintance had mentioned him casually. The reconnection was gentle, natural. The release of resentment opened the channel for reconciliation. Resentment is another form of attachment. It binds you to the past. Release frees you for the present. Many people believe miracles are dramatic, lightning from heaven, sudden wealth falling from the sky. But often miracles are quiet realignments, a phone call, an idea, a shift in timing, a door you did not know existed. The subconscious mind is your point of contact with the infinite. It works ceaselessly day and night. When you go to sleep in trust, it continues arranging. When you fall asleep in fear, it continues reinforcing fear. The state before sleep is especially powerful. In that drowsy condition, suggestions sink deeply. If you want to release fully, do so at night. Say gently, "It is done. I trust completely," and drift into rest. The subconscious accepts the final impression of the day with minimal resistance. There was a student overwhelmed by exams. He imagined failure repeatedly. I told him to stop studying late into panic and instead spend the final moments before sleep affirming calm competence. Divine intelligence brings to my memory everything I need. He followed this practice faithfully. His performance improved not because he crammed more, but because his anxiety lessened. Calm enhances recall. Release enhances performance. Perhaps you are facing something right now: financial uncertainty, relationship strain, health concerns, a decision you cannot seem to resolve. Ask yourself honestly, are you gripping it, or have you truly placed it in God's hands? To place something in God's hands is not poetic language. It is a psychological act. It is choosing to stop mentally rehearsing disaster. It is choosing to feel peace before evidence appears. Evidence follows feeling more often than feeling follows evidence. Let me explain this clearly. The subconscious mind cannot distinguish between vividly imagined fear and actual danger. When you rehearse catastrophe, your body reacts as if it is happening. Stress hormones surge, clarity diminishes. But when you rehearse trust, your body shifts into equilibrium. In equilibrium, creativity awakens. Insight surfaces. Release invites insight. Many solutions arise not through force, but through relaxed awareness. An idea comes while walking. A solution appears in conversation. A memory resurfaces at the right time. These are not coincidences. They are the natural flow of divine intelligence when resistance subsides. There is an ancient story of a man struggling to cross a river while clinging to a heavy bundle. Exhausted, he nearly drowned. When he finally released the bundle, he discovered he could float effortlessly. Your bundle may be fear of failure. It may be guilt from the past. It may be insistence that things must unfold in a specific way. Release it. You are not meant to carry the weight of omniscience. You are not meant to orchestrate every outcome. You are meant to cooperate with divine order. Cooperation begins with trust. I have seen businesses resurrected, relationships healed, illnesses alleviated, opportunities multiplied, not through frantic effort, but through calm surrender. This does not eliminate action. It purifies action. When you act from trust rather than panic, your actions are precise, not scattered, inspired, not desperate. There was a writer who had faced rejection for years. Every manuscript returned increased his self-doubt. He oscillated between overconfidence and despair. I told him to release the outcome of publication entirely, to write because he loved writing, to surrender the need for approval. Within a year of shifting his mindset, his work deepened. The authenticity in his writing attracted attention. An editor discovered his work not through aggressive pitching, but through quiet circulation. When he stopped chasing validation, recognition found him. Desperation repels. Alignment attracts. You must remember this: divine intelligence is not withholding your good. Often it is waiting for you to stop resisting it. Resistance can appear in subtle forms. Constant comparison, envy of others' success, doubt in your own worthiness. These attitudes create internal friction. Bless the success of others. It signals abundance to your subconscious. Release comparison. It signals self-acceptance. Gratitude is another form of surrender. When you give thanks in advance, you are affirming trust in unseen order. Thankfulness says, I know the harvest is coming. I once knew a man who struggled financially for years. He complained constantly about bills. His conversation revolved around lack. I suggested he begin thanking God each day for the money he needed before it appeared. At first he felt foolish, but he persisted. Gradually his mindset shifted from scarcity to expectancy. Opportunities emerged, freelance work, partnerships, ideas he previously dismissed. The outer increase followed the inner shift. Release transforms your inner atmosphere. The outer world reflects it. There is a profound freedom in saying, whatever happens, I trust God's wisdom. That sentence alone dissolves immense tension. But it must be sincere. You cannot speak surrender while secretly planning for worst-case scenarios. The subconscious hears the hidden narrative. If you struggle with full trust, begin gently. Say, I am learning to trust. I release this as best I can. Growth is gradual. Sometimes miracles are not the arrival of something new, but the removal of something harmful. A relationship ends that was draining you. A job dissolves that limited your growth. At first it feels like loss. Later it reveals itself as redirection. Release allows redirection. I have observed that many people experience their greatest breakthroughs immediately after their deepest surrender. Not because surrender manipulates God, but because surrender aligns them with what was already prepared. There is a divine orchestration at work beyond conscious planning. Your task is not to micromanage it. Your task is to trust it. Imagine trying to direct every wave in the ocean. Impossible. Yet the ocean moves perfectly without your intervention. Life flows with similar intelligence. When you release, you enter the current. And in that current, miracles are natural. Perhaps tonight, before you sleep, you will whisper softly, I give this completely to God. Not as a last resort, but as a sacred choice. Feel the relief of not having to solve everything. Feel the dignity of trust. Feel the quiet strength of surrender. In that stillness, something subtle begins. The gears of divine order move. Pathways adjust. Hearts soften. Opportunities align. And you awaken not only to changed circumstances, but to changed consciousness. You discover that the greatest miracle was never external. It was the moment you let go and found peace. From that peace, everything else flows. Release it to God and watch what unfolds. There is one more truth I must share with you. And it is perhaps the most liberating of all. When you truly release something to God, you are not persuading an external force to intervene in your life. You are harmonizing your conscious mind with the deeper intelligence already operating within you. You are stepping out of conflict and into cooperation. So many people believe surrender is dramatic, that it requires tears, desperation, or some grand spiritual declaration. But often, true surrender is quiet. It is a simple inward decision. I no longer fight this, I trust. I once met a woman who had spent years trying to control every detail of her family's future. She managed schedules obsessively, planned finances rigidly, monitored every possibility that might threaten stability. She believed vigilance equaled protection. But vigilance without trust becomes anxiety, and anxiety spreads like smoke through every room of a home. Her children grew tense. Her husband withdrew. She could not understand why her attempts to secure happiness were producing the opposite effect. When she finally admitted that she was exhausted from trying to control everything, I suggested a practice. Each morning she would say, "Divine order governs my household. I release the need to manage every outcome. I trust." At first, nothing external changed. But internally, she softened. Her tone became gentler. She listened more. She worried less. Within months, the atmosphere of the home transformed. Conflicts decreased. Communication improved. Unexpected financial improvements appeared through opportunities her husband pursued once the pressure lifted. The miracle did not begin outside her. It began within her. You must understand something very important. Divine intelligence does not operate through panic. It operates through clarity, and clarity requires calm. When your mind is agitated, you block intuitive guidance. When your heart is contracted, you restrict creative flow. But when you release, your perception sharpens. You begin noticing subtle signals you previously ignored. There is a sacred rhythm to life. Seeds do not bloom the moment they are planted. Yet no gardener stands over the soil demanding growth. The gardener trusts the process. You must become that gardener. Plant your desire through prayer. Water it with gratitude, then release it with faith. Another man once came to me with deep regret. He had made decisions in his youth that cost him financially and emotionally. For decades he replayed those mistakes. His present was haunted by his past. "I cannot forgive myself," he confessed. Self-condemnation is one of the heaviest burdens a soul can carry. And as long as he clung to guilt, he blocked renewal. I instructed him to say daily, "I release my past to divine mercy. I accept forgiveness. I am renewed." The first week, the words felt hollow. The second week, less so. Over time, the grip of shame weakened. New friendships formed. He pursued opportunities he once believed he did not deserve. His entire posture toward life changed, not because the past disappeared, but because he stopped clinging to it. Release also means releasing self-judgment. You cannot move forward while chained to yesterday. Perhaps your burden is not fear of the future, but regret of the past. Release that too. Divine love is not limited by your history. There is no situation so complex that infinite intelligence cannot untangle it. But you must stop tightening the knot. I have noticed that when people finally surrender, they often describe the same sensation: lightness. As though a physical weight has lifted from their chest. As though breathing becomes easier. This is not imagination. The body responds to the mind. When you let go mentally, your nervous system recalibrates, tension decreases, energy returns. Peace is not merely spiritual, it is physiological, and from that peace, inspired action emerges naturally. You will still make phone calls, you will still attend meetings, you will still seek solutions. But you will do so without desperation. Desperation clouds judgment. Peace clarifies it. There was a young entrepreneur who believed his entire identity depended on one business deal. He obsessed over it day and night. When the deal stalled, he spiraled into anxiety. I encouraged him to detach his identity from the outcome. "You are not your contract," I told him. "Release it." Reluctantly. He did. He focused instead on developing his skills, nurturing his team, expanding his knowledge. The original deal never materialized. But months later, a larger opportunity appeared, one that required the very growth he had undergone during the waiting period. Had the first deal succeeded, he would not have been ready for the greater one. Sometimes release does not bring what you wanted. It brings something better. But you cannot receive better while clutching what no longer serves you. I want you to reflect deeply on this. How much of your stress comes not from the situation itself, but from your insistence that it must resolve in a particular way? Insistence narrows possibility, trust expands it. When you release, you are not abandoning responsibility. You are transferring ultimate responsibility to a wisdom greater than your own. Think of a child learning to swim. If the child thrashes wildly in fear, exhaustion follows. But if the child relaxes and trusts the water's buoyancy, floating becomes possible. Faith is buoyancy. I once observed a man facing a legal battle that threatened to dismantle his livelihood. Every conversation revolved around potential catastrophe. His imagination rehearsed courtroom defeat. I asked him to imagine a different scene, not victory, not defeat, but peace. I instructed him to say nightly, "Divine justice prevails. I release this case entirely." As weeks passed, his internal panic subsided. In that calm state, he and his legal team discovered a strategic detail previously overlooked. The case resolved more favorably than expected. The insight had always been there, but fear had blinded him. Release removes blinders. It is important to understand that surrender is not a one-time declaration. It is a practice. Each time anxiety resurfaces, you release again. Each time fear whispers, you reaffirm trust. You may need to release the same concern dozens of times. That is not failure. That is discipline. Over time, the intervals between worry shorten. The recovery to peace quickens. And eventually, peace becomes your baseline. Imagine living from that state daily. Not because your life is flawless, but because your trust is steady. When you release something to God, you free your creative energy. Instead of being consumed by rumination, your mind becomes available for inspiration. Many inventions, artistic breakthroughs, and life-changing ideas have emerged not during frantic effort, but during relaxation, a walk, a shower, a quiet evening. Why? Because the conscious mind steps aside, allowing the subconscious to present solutions. Release is stepping aside. There is a story of a musician who struggled to complete a composition for months. The harder he tried, the more blocked he felt. One evening, frustrated, he walked away from the piano entirely. "I give this piece to God," he muttered. The next morning, the melody flowed effortlessly. You see, divine intelligence works most freely when you stop forcing. There is also this deeper dimension. When you release, you cultivate humility. You acknowledge that you are not the ultimate authority over life. That humility creates openness. Openness invites grace. I have often said that prayer is not informing God of your needs. It is aligning yourself with the solution. Alignment requires surrender. There will be moments when your faith feels fragile. That is natural. You are human. In those moments, do not condemn yourself. Simply return to the practice. God, I release this again. Each repetition strengthens trust. If you find yourself awake at night worrying, do not fight the worry aggressively. Gently redirect it. Say, "This belongs to you." Visualize placing your concern into loving hands far stronger than your own. Feel the relief, and then sleep. Sleep itself is a form of surrender. Each night you release control of your body's processes. Your heart beats, your lungs breathe, your cells repair without conscious supervision. If divine intelligence manages your body effortlessly, can it not manage your circumstances? The same power that heals a wound without your instruction can heal a relationship. The same intelligence that coordinates digestion can coordinate opportunity. But you must allow it. Allowing requires letting go of the illusion that anxiety equals productivity. Anxiety is not action, it is friction. Release eliminates friction. There was a woman who feared financial ruin after losing her job. She updated her RA sum obsessively, but with dread. Every rejection reinforced fear. I advised her to spend 1 week focusing not on job hunting, but on inner calm. "Divine supply is constant," she would affirm. I release fear of lack. When she resumed her search from that steadier state, her interviews changed. She spoke with confidence rather than desperation. Within a short time, She received not just a position, but one aligned with her deeper interests. Her circumstances shifted because her inner state shifted. Everything begins within. Release also dissolves comparison. When you trust your path, you stop measuring it against others. Envy fades. Contentment grows. Contentment is fertile ground for miracles. If you are constantly asking, why is their life progressing faster than mine? You create resistance. But if you bless their progress and trust your timing, you remain open. Divine timing is precise. Sometimes delay is preparation. Sometimes redirection is protection. You cannot always see which is which in the moment. That is why surrender is essential. If you could see the entire tapestry of your life from beginning to end, you would likely choose trust over worry. But because you see only a fragment, fear attempts to fill the gaps. Release hands the incomplete picture back to the one who sees it fully. I want you to imagine something. Imagine that every challenge you face is already paired with its solution, not visible yet, but prepared. When you worry, you delay noticing the solution. When you release, you become receptive. Receptivity is powerful. There is a quiet confidence that develops in those who practice surrender regularly. They are not indifferent to problems. They simply refuse to let problems define their state. They move through difficulty with steadiness. That steadiness attracts respect, cooperation, and opportunity. Have you ever noticed that calm individuals often seem to receive help unexpectedly? People are drawn to stability. They trust those who are composed. Your calm may open doors socially as well as spiritually. Release transforms not only your internal world, but your relational world. Perhaps the greatest gift of surrender is this: it restores joy to the present moment. When you are not consumed by controlling tomorrow, you can appreciate today. You notice small blessings, a kind word, sunlight on your face, the sound of laughter. Gratitude expands, and gratitude accelerates manifestation because it affirms abundance already exists. When you combine release with gratitude, you create a powerful spiritual posture. I trust what is coming, and I appreciate what is. From that posture, miracles feel natural rather than shocking. I have lived long enough to see patterns repeat. Those who cling tightly often exhaust themselves. Those who release wisely often prosper peacefully. Not because life spares them challenge, but because they navigate challenge differently. Release does not guarantee ease. It guarantees alignment. Alignment brings clarity. Clarity guides action. Guided action produces results. If there is one practice I would urge you to adopt tonight, it is this: before sleep, release the single burden that weighs heaviest on your mind. Name it gently. God, I give you this. Feel the transfer, and then rest. Over days and weeks, you will notice something remarkable. Your reflex will change. Instead of immediately worrying, you will instinctively release. Instead of spiraling, you will stabilize. Instead of forcing, you will flow. And in that flow, you will see how life rearranges itself with intelligence far beyond your limited calculations. The moment you let go, miracles begin, not because God suddenly hears you, but because you finally hear God. The peace that follows surrender is not accidental. It is confirmation. Trust it, release it, and watch how divine order unfolds in ways that exceed your expectation and surpass your fear. This is the law of spiritual cooperation. This is the quiet power of letting go, and this is how miracles truly begin. There is something even deeper that unfolds when surrender becomes a way of living rather than a technique you practice only in crisis. At first, you release specific problems, a debt, a diagnosis, a strained relationship. But over time, you begin to release something far greater, the illusion that you were ever meant to carry life alone. Most people live as though everything depends entirely on their mental calculation. They believe that if they do not analyze every possibility, anticipate every danger, and engineer every outcome, life will collapse. But consider this: before you were born, the laws that govern your body were already in motion. Before you formed a single conscious thought, your heart knew how to beat. Before you learned to speak, your lungs knew how to breathe. You did not command these processes. They were entrusted to a deeper intelligence. That same intelligence has not abandoned you now. When you release, you return to cooperation with that intelligence. There was a man who once told me, "If I don't worry, I feel irresponsible." He equated anxiety with care. But worry is not love. Worry is fear disguised as devotion. True care acts from clarity, not panic. When you release, you do not stop caring, you care more wisely. I once worked with a mother whose daughter was struggling in school. Every grade report sent her into silent despair. She corrected homework with tension in her voice. Her daughter felt judged rather than supported. I suggested she release her fear of academic failure and focus instead on affirming her daughter's intelligence and capability. Divine wisdom guides her mind, she would say nightly. I release fear and trust her growth. Within months, the child's performance improved. Not because pressure increased, but because pressure decreased. Encouragement replaced anxiety. Confidence blossomed. Release changes the atmosphere in which growth occurs. Atmosphere is powerful. In business, in relationships, in health, the emotional climate matters more than we realize. If your internal atmosphere is thick with fear, opportunities feel scarce. If your internal atmosphere is open and trusting, opportunities feel abundant. You may ask, but what if I release and nothing happens? Let me answer you gently. Something always happens. Even if external conditions remain unchanged temporarily, your inner condition transforms, and that inner transformation alters the trajectory of everything that follows. There was a man who had prayed for years for reconciliation with his adult son. Every attempt to reconnect resulted in silence. Eventually, he surrendered the need for immediate restoration. "I release my son to divine love," he would say. He focused on becoming peaceful within himself rather than forcing conversation. Months passed. Then, without warning, his son appeared at his door. "I needed time," the son admitted, "but I could feel you were no longer angry." The release of emotional pressure created the space for return. You see, people can feel when you are gripping them with expectation. They can feel when your love is conditional on compliance. Release makes love pure. And pure love is magnetic. Let us go deeper still. Sometimes what you must release is not a person or a problem, but an identity. You may have defined yourself as the struggling one, the unlucky one, the one who never succeeds. These identities are subtle attachments. They shape expectation. They influence behavior. When you release them, you create room for a new self-concept. There was a woman who repeated for years, "Nothing ever works out for me." That sentence became her subconscious instruction. I asked her to release that identity entirely. To say instead, "Divine favor surrounds me, I am guided into right action." At first, her mind resisted. But gradually, her self-perception shifted. She began noticing small successes. Those small successes grew. Release old narratives. The subconscious does not argue with repetition. It builds from it. If you repeat fear, it builds fear. If you repeat trust, it builds trust. Release is choosing what to repeat. Perhaps the most profound surrender is this, releasing the timeline. Many people trust God, but only within a deadline. I trust you, but it must happen this month. I trust you, but I cannot wait another year. Impatience creates tension. Divine timing considers factors beyond your immediate view, other people's readiness, unseen preparations, circumstances aligning invisibly. There was a young man who desperately wanted a promotion. He believed he deserved it immediately. When it did not arrive, resentment grew. I encouraged him to release the promotion itself and instead focus on excellence in his present role. "Divine order promotes me at the perfect time," he would affirm. 2 years later, he was offered not just the promotion he wanted, but a position in a different department with far greater responsibility and compensation. Had the earlier promotion occurred, he would have been confined to a smaller path. Sometimes delay is expansion in disguise. When you release the timeline, you relieve yourself of unnecessary pressure. There is a sacred maturity that develops through surrender. You begin to realize that your value does not fluctuate with outcomes. Whether a deal closes or falls through, you remain grounded. Whether someone chooses you or does not, you remain whole. This stability makes you powerful. Power rooted in calm is enduring. Another dimension of release is forgiving circumstances themselves. Have you ever noticed how some people remain bitter toward life? They say, "Life has been unfair." Resentment toward existence creates contraction. But when you say, even this experience serves my growth, you expand. There was a man who lost his business during an economic downturn. For years he carried anger at the market, at competitors, at fate itself. Eventually, exhausted by bitterness, he surrendered the resentment. He accepted that the closure was part of his journey. From that acceptance, he retrained in a new field, one aligned with his true interests. He later admitted that losing the business was the doorway to his authentic calling. Release bitterness toward life. You cannot embrace new beginnings while condemning old endings. There will be moments when surrender feels like standing at the edge of uncertainty without guarantees. But understand this, control never provided guarantees either. It only created the illusion of them. Trust does not remove uncertainty. It transforms your relationship with it. Uncertainty becomes possibility instead of threat. I want you to consider something quietly. What if the very struggle you are resisting is preparing you for the blessing you are asking for? What if the delay is strengthening your character so you can sustain what you desire? When you release resistance to the process itself, you cooperate with preparation. There is also this beautiful paradox: when you no longer need the miracle in order to feel complete, the miracle often arrives. Because your completeness signals abundance, not lack. I have seen individuals receive financial windfalls only after they stopped obsessing over money. I have seen relationships form after people embraced solitude. I have seen health improve when fear of illness diminished. The pattern is consistent. Release shifts you from grasping to receiving. Receiving is gentle. It does not demand, it allows. There is an ancient wisdom that says, to everything there is a season. You cannot force winter to bloom like spring, but you can trust that spring follows winter naturally. Surrender is trusting the season. You may be in a season of planting, not harvesting, or a season of pruning, not expansion. When you release your insistence on constant bloom, you experience the beauty of growth in all its phases. Another truth: surrender increases resilience. When your identity is anchored in trust rather than outcome, disappointment does not shatter you. It redirects you. A failed interview becomes practice for the next opportunity. A rejected proposal becomes refinement. A closed door becomes redirection. Release makes you adaptable. Adaptability invites opportunity. There was a young artist who believed success meant immediate recognition. When her early exhibitions attracted little attention, she considered quitting. I encouraged her to release the need for applause and instead deepen her craft. Divine creativity flows through me, she affirmed. Recognition comes in perfect timing. Years later, her work gained momentum gradually. But by then, her art had matured far beyond its early form. Had she succeeded quickly, her growth may have stalled. Release protects your development. You are not abandoned in your waiting. You are being shaped. Let that truth calm you. There is something profoundly sacred about choosing peace before proof. It declares that your faith is not conditional. When you release, you declare, even if I cannot see the path, I trust the direction. This trust does not make you passive. It makes you powerful. Because power without panic is sustainable. You may not control events, but you always control your internal posture. Choose release. Choose trust. Choose to place your concern in hands wiser than your own. Over time, this practice becomes instinctive. Instead of spiraling into fear, you pause. Instead of overanalyzing, you breathe. Instead of gripping tightly, you loosen your hold. And in that loosened hold, grace moves. Perhaps tonight, you will take inventory of your heart. What are you still carrying? What weight have you refused to set down? What outcome are you trying to script in detail? Bring it gently into your awareness, and then say slowly and sincerely, I release this to God. Do not rush the words. Feel them. Imagine the burden leaving your shoulders. Imagine the path ahead guided by intelligence beyond your own. You are not alone in your life. You were never meant to be. Release is remembrance. It reminds you that divine love is not distant. It is present. It is active. It is involved. When you stop interfering, you begin cooperating. And cooperation with divine intelligence is the birthplace of miracles. Not always loud miracles, not always instant miracles, but real, steady, undeniable transformations. The moment you let go, miracles start, first in your mind, then in your heart, and finally in your circumstances. Trust the order. Trust the timing. Trust the wisdom that holds you even now. Release it, and allow the miracle to unfold. There is a final layer of surrender that very few people ever reach, and yet it is the one that transforms life from occasional miracle to continuous grace. At first, you release problems. Then you release outcomes. Eventually, you release the belief that you are separate from the very power you are trusting. This is the great awakening hidden inside surrender. You are not begging a distant force to intervene. You are aligning your surface mind with the deeper intelligence that already sustains you. The same power that organizes galaxies is not absent from your daily concerns. It breathes through you. It thinks through you. It moves through you when you are not blocking it with fear. The illusion has always been separation. Surrender dissolves that illusion. There was a period in my own life when I felt alone in my responsibilities. Every decision felt heavy. Every mistake felt personal. I believed everything depended on my cleverness, my strength, my strategy. The exhaustion that followed was inevitable. One evening, in complete stillness, I realized something quietly revolutionary. I had been acting as though I were the source of power rather than the channel of it. That realization changed everything. When you understand that you are a channel rather than the source, pressure dissolves. Your role is cooperation, not domination. A river does not strain to flow. It moves because it is aligned with gravity. You move best when aligned with divine order. This is why the moment of true release feels like coming home. It feels familiar. It feels natural. It feels like remembering something you once knew before fear clouded it. There is a kind of holy relief in admitting, I do not have to control this. Control has always been heavy. Trust is light. Have you ever noticed how tightly you hold your jaw when you worry? How shallow your breath becomes? How your shoulders tense? Your body reveals your mental posture. Now imagine loosening that posture. Imagine your breath deepening. Imagine your shoulders lowering. That is surrender in physical form. And when the body relaxes, the mind becomes receptive. Receptivity is where divine ideas enter. So many people miss inspired guidance because they are too busy rehearsing fear. You may be praying for direction while simultaneously drowning out the answer with noise. Release creates silence. And in silence, guidance whispers. It may come as a quiet thought. Call that person. It may come as a gentle nudge. Try something different. It may come as peace about letting something go. But you must be calm enough to notice. I once knew a man who was desperately seeking a new career path. He made lists daily, compared options endlessly, consulted everyone he knew. Nothing felt clear. Finally, exhausted by indecision, he surrendered the entire question. Show me where I belong, he prayed. For weeks, he did nothing dramatic. He simply focused on being attentive rather than anxious. One afternoon, he volunteered to help a friend with a small project, something unrelated to his previous field. In that experience, he felt a spark of joy he had not felt in years. That spark became direction, but it only appeared after he stopped forcing clarity. Sometimes guidance does not shout. It glows softly. You must release urgency to perceive it. There is also this deeper reality when you release. You allow divine timing to coordinate not only your readiness, but the readiness of others. Perhaps the opportunity you seek depends on someone else's preparation. Perhaps the relationship you desire requires another soul's growth. Perhaps the door you want open depends on circumstances aligning beyond your view. When you insist, you assume you see the whole picture. When you surrender, you acknowledge that you see only a fragment. Humility expands your horizon. I have often observed that the most peaceful individuals are not those with the fewest challenges, but those with the deepest trust. They approach uncertainty not as threat, but as unfolding. They do not demand that life conform to their script. They participate in its mystery. This participation is powerful. You become flexible without becoming weak. You become confident without becoming rigid. You become active without becoming frantic. Release strengthens your spiritual backbone. It removes the brittle need for control and replaces it with quiet assurance. There was a woman who once said to me, "If I let go, I'm afraid nothing will happen." I smiled gently and asked, "What has happened so far while you were gripping?" Her silence answered the question. You see, gripping does not guarantee movement. It often prevents it. The seed that refuses to split will never become a tree. Splitting feels like loss, but it is growth. Letting go of who you thought you had to be may be the very doorway to who you are meant to become. You may need to release the identity of the struggler, release the need to prove yourself, release the belief that you must suffer to deserve blessing. These beliefs create subconscious resistance. Divine love does not require exhaustion as proof of worthiness. It requires openness. There is something beautifully paradoxical about surrender. The more you trust, the more capable you feel. Because trust restores energy. Energy fuels action. Action guided by calm is precise and effective. I have seen individuals rebuild their lives after devastating loss, not because they forced positivity, but because they released bitterness. Bitterness binds you to what hurt you. Release frees you to build again. You cannot carry resentment and expect renewal. Let it go. Even if you must let it go repeatedly, there are nights when surrender will feel easy. There are days when fear will return stubbornly. Do not be discouraged. Surrender is not perfection. It is practice. Each time you choose trust over panic, you strengthen a spiritual muscle. And over time, that muscle becomes your foundation. Imagine living from a place where your first instinct in difficulty is not dread, but quiet confidence. Imagine responding to uncertainty with curiosity rather than alarm. This is not fantasy. It is the fruit of consistent release. There is also this truth. When you release your obsession with outcome, you become more present. And presence is powerful. In presence, you notice small opportunities others overlook. In presence, you respond wisely rather than react impulsively. In presence, relationships deepen. Miracles often arrive disguised as moments. A conversation that shifts perspective. A delay that prevents disaster. A redirection that leads to unexpected joy. If you are always staring anxiously at the horizon, you may miss the gift in your hands. Release broadens your awareness, and awareness reveals provision already surrounding you. You may discover that some prayers were answered long ago in forms you failed to recognize. Trust clarifies memory. Let me speak directly to your heart now. Whatever you are carrying, the fear, the disappointment, the longing, you do not have to carry it alone. You were never designed to be the sole architect of your destiny. You are a participant in divine order, not its manager. Release does not diminish your agency, it refines it. When you act from surrender, you act from alignment. Aligned action is powerful. Misaligned action exhausts. You may still work diligently, you may still plan wisely, but you will do so without inner strain. That absence of strain is the doorway through which grace enters. Grace is not random. It flows where resistance ceases. There is a quiet miracle unfolding even now as you listen to these words. The miracle of awareness. You are becoming conscious of the weight you have been carrying. And awareness is the first step toward release. Do not rush this process. Sit with it. Breathe into it and gently, sincerely say, "I trust." Not because you see everything clearly, not because you have guarantees, but because you recognize that divine intelligence has guided you through every previous chapter. You survived what once seemed impossible. You endured what once felt unbearable. You stand here today not by accident, but by grace. That same grace remains active. Release your timeline. Release your anxiety. Release your need to control every detail, and watch what happens when your life becomes a partnership rather than a struggle. Miracles are not rare events. They are natural expressions of divine order when you step out of the way. The moment you let go, miracles start, first as peace, then as clarity, then as movement, then as visible transformation. Trust that sequence. Peace precedes change. Clarity precedes opportunity. Alignment precedes manifestation. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are not alone in your waiting. Release it to God, and allow divine love to complete what your worry never could. This is the power of surrender. This is the quiet beginning of miracles. And this power is available to you now. There is one final dimension of surrender that must be understood if you are to live in continuous peace rather than temporary relief. True release is not merely about handing over a problem. It is about transforming your relationship with life itself. Most people view life as something to manage, negotiate, and defend against. They brace for impact. They anticipate disappointment. They prepare for loss. But when surrender becomes your posture, life no longer feels like an adversary. It becomes a collaboration. You begin to sense that there is an intelligence woven through every circumstance, even the ones you do not prefer. There was a man who once told me, "Every time something goes wrong, I assume it's proof I'm failing." That assumption alone created endless anxiety. I asked him to consider another possibility. What if every disruption was a redirection rather than a punishment? That shift in perspective softened him immediately. Within weeks, a project he had mourned losing was replaced by something far more aligned with his abilities. But the real transformation had already occurred. He no longer interpreted setbacks as personal attacks. Release transforms interpretation, and interpretation shapes experience. When you surrender, you begin to see patterns of protection in what once felt like rejection. The relationship that ended may have spared you deeper heartache. The opportunity that fell through may have prevented misalignment. The delay that frustrated you may have strengthened you. Surrender allows hindsight to become foresight. You begin trusting that even what you cannot yet understand serves a larger harmony. There is also a subtle but powerful shift that occurs when you release. You stop bargaining with God. So many prayers are negotiations. If this happens, I will be grateful. If that resolves, I will finally relax. But surrender says, I relax now. And that present relaxation is a declaration of faith stronger than any vow. When you release in the present moment, you break the cycle of postponing peace. Peace is not a reward for solved problems. It is a state you choose before solutions appear. That choice is powerful. There was a woman who constantly postponed joy. She would say, "Once I find the right partner, then I'll be happy. Once my finances improve, then I'll feel secure." Years passed in that conditional waiting. Finally, she recognized the pattern and chose differently. She began cultivating joy independent of circumstance. She practiced gratitude without evidence. And then, almost paradoxically, circumstances improved. Not because joy manipulated outcomes, but because joy aligned her with opportunity. Release detaches happiness from outcome. When happiness is no longer hostage to events, you become magnetic. People are drawn to peace. Opportunities are drawn to clarity. Success is drawn to confidence. Surrender cultivates all three. You may notice that the more you release, the less you fear loss, because you realize that your security does not lie in possession, but in connection to divine source. Source cannot be depleted. Opportunities may change form, relationships may evolve, roles may shift, but the source from which all provision flows remains constant. Release anchors you in that constancy. There is a profound spiritual maturity that emerges when you understand this deeply. You are sustained, not scrambling. You are guided, not guessing. You are supported, not abandoned. That understanding transforms even mundane experiences. Waiting in line becomes an opportunity for calm rather than irritation. Delays become moments for reflection rather than frustration. Challenges become classrooms rather than catastrophes. Surrender changes your lens, and through that lens, miracles become more frequent, not because life changes suddenly, because you perceive its grace more clearly. There is another truth worth embracing. Sometimes the miracle you are seeking is already present, disguised as growth. You may be asking for strength, and life is giving you situations that build it. You may be asking for wisdom, and life is presenting lessons that teach it. You may be asking for patience, and life is providing waiting. When you release resistance to the form of the answer, you discover that the answer was already unfolding. There was a young woman who prayed fervently for confidence. Yet every opportunity that required public speaking filled her with dread. Eventually, she surrendered the fear rather than avoiding the stage. "If I stumble, I trust the experience," she told herself. Her first few attempts were imperfect. But something shifted. She stopped judging herself harshly. Over time, her confidence grew not because fear disappeared instantly, but because she stopped resisting growth. Release creates space for expansion. Growth often feels uncomfortable, but discomfort embraced through trust becomes transformation. You cannot expand while clinging to comfort. Surrender is the willingness to step forward without rigid guarantees. It is trusting that even if you fall, you will be carried. There is a sacred resilience that develops in those who practice release consistently. They no longer interpret every obstacle as evidence of doom. They ask instead, "What is this teaching me?" That question opens insight. Insight guides evolution. Evolution produces miracles not only in circumstance, but in character. Character refined through surrender becomes unshakable. And when you are unshakable internally, external shifts do not destabilize you. That stability attracts trust from others. Trust builds relationships. Relationships create opportunities. You see how surrender ripples outward. It is not passive. It is profoundly active. It reorganizes your inner architecture, and from that new architecture, life reorganizes around you. Perhaps the greatest secret of release is this: you cannot lose what is truly meant for you. If something leaves despite your effort, it was not yours to hold. If something remains despite uncertainty, it is aligned. Release reduces fear of loss because it affirms divine orchestration. You begin to understand that what departs clears space for what belongs. There was a man who mourned the collapse of a partnership he believed essential to his future. He fought to repair it, to salvage it, to resurrect it. Finally exhausted, he surrendered. If this ends, it ends. I trust what comes next. The partnership dissolved. Months later, he entered a new collaboration far more harmonious and successful. In hindsight, he realized that clinging to the first partnership would have limited his growth. Release revealed alignment. Letting go does not always restore what was. Sometimes it replaces it with something better. That is divine order at work. You must trust that order, not blindly, but deliberately. Trust is a decision repeated daily. When fear resurfaces, repeat it again. When doubt whispers, respond with calm affirmation. Divine love guides this. Repetition imprints belief. Belief shapes perception. Perception influences action. Action produces outcome. The chain begins with trust. There will always be variables beyond your control. Markets fluctuate, people change. Health shifts, seasons turn. Control was never the true source of stability. Alignment was. Release aligns you. Alignment stabilizes you. Stability empowers you. Empowerment manifests results. And through it all, peace remains your anchor. Imagine waking tomorrow without the weight you carried yesterday. Imagine approaching your challenges with curiosity rather than dread. Imagine responding to uncertainty with calm assurance. This is not a distant ideal. It is available the moment you choose to let go. Release it to God, not once, but as often as needed. Each release strengthens your faith. Each act of trust deepens your connection. Each surrender opens another doorway. You will begin to notice synchronicities, small alignments that feel almost too precise to be coincidence, a message arriving at the right time, an introduction occurring unexpectedly, an idea surfacing exactly when needed. These are not accidents. They are the quiet choreography of divine intelligence responding to your alignment. But they become visible only when you are not clouded by panic. Panic narrows vision. Peace expands it. Choose expansion. Choose surrender. Choose to trust that the same power that sustained you through every past trial will sustain you now. The moment you let go, miracles start. Not always loudly, not always dramatically, but steadily, surely, faithfully. Release it, and step into the quiet certainty that you are carried by wisdom greater than your own. This is not weakness. This is strength rooted in divine partnership. This is living not in fear but in faith. And this is how miracles continue to unfold, not once, not occasionally, but as a natural rhythm of a life aligned with God. Trust that rhythm, rest in it, and let it carry you forward. And now, let us go even deeper into what truly happens the moment you release something to God. There is a shift that occurs beneath thought, beneath emotion, beneath even conscious awareness. It is subtle, but it is profound. When you surrender completely, you are no longer operating from the surface level of the mind. You are activating the deeper currents of divine order that have always been present. Most people live from the surface. They react to circumstances. They interpret events through fear. They attempt to correct outcomes through force. But beneath that surface mind is something steady, something intelligent, something that does not panic when you panic. Surrender is the decision to drop below the turbulence and enter the depth. Think of the ocean. At the surface, waves crash violently. Storms stir chaos. But deep below, there is stillness. The deeper you go, the calmer it becomes. Your conscious mind is the surface. Your subconscious, the part connected to divine intelligence, is the depth. When you release, you descend. You stop fighting waves and you rest in current. I once met a woman who had lived her entire life in anticipation of disaster. She expected betrayal. She expected illness. She expected disappointment. When something good happened, she would say, "This won't last." She believed she was protecting herself from hurt, but she was actually training her subconscious to expect loss. One day, after years of emotional exhaustion, she made a quiet decision. I refuse to brace for tragedy. I release this constant fear. She began practicing simple trust. Each time anxiety arose, she would say, "I choose peace." At first, nothing external changed, but internally she stopped scanning for danger. That internal shift altered her posture, her tone, her responses. Relationships improved. Opportunities felt safer to pursue. And slowly, the life she had feared began to transform. Because she stopped feeding fear. Release starves fear, and fear, when unfazed, weakens. You must understand this clearly. Fear is sustained by repetition. The more you rehearse worst-case scenarios, the more powerful they feel. But when you interrupt that rehearsal with surrender, you break the pattern. Patterns shape destiny. Surrender reshapes patterns. Let me share another story. A man came to me deeply troubled about his reputation. A misunderstanding at work had spread rumors. He desperately wanted to defend himself, to correct every whisper. His mind raced constantly with imagined confrontations. I asked him, "Have you placed this in God's hands?" He replied, "I don't know how." So I told him, "Say, divine truth governs my name. I release the need to control perception." He practiced this daily. Instead of aggressively defending himself, he focused on integrity in his actions. Over time, the truth surfaced naturally. Those who had believed rumors began to see inconsistency in them. The situation resolved not through argument, but through alignment. When you release your obsession with defending yourself, you allow truth to defend you. There is tremendous power in restraint born of trust. It is not weakness to step back. It is wisdom. You see, surrender does not eliminate effort. It purifies motive. When effort is rooted in fear, it is frantic. When effort is rooted in trust, it is focused. And focused effort accomplishes far more. Many people misunderstand miracles. They think miracles are interruptions of natural law. But what if miracles are simply the restoration of natural order once resistance is removed? When a river is blocked, water stagnates. Remove the obstruction and flow resumes. The river was always meant to flow. Your life is meant to flow. Resistance creates stagnation. Release removes obstruction. Flow returns. You may ask, how do I know if I've truly released something? The answer is simple. Your body will tell you. If you still feel tightness, urgency, compulsion, you are still gripping. When you have released, you feel spacious. You may still desire the outcome, but you are no longer desperate for it. Desire without desperation is powerful. Desperation repels. Calm desire attracts. There was a young man who longed for financial independence. He watched market trends obsessively. He checked his accounts multiple times daily. His mood rose and fell with numbers. Eventually, he realized that his anxiety was consuming him. He decided to release control over short-term fluctuations. He made wise plans, yes, but he stopped monitoring obsessively. That emotional detachment allowed him to make clearer decisions. He no longer reacted impulsively to market swings. Over time, his financial stability improved. Not because he worked harder, but because he worked calmer. Release clarifies thinking. Clarity improves choices. Improved choices create better results. It is a quiet chain reaction. There is also something sacred about releasing the need for certainty. Human beings crave guarantees. but certainty is rarely available. Surrender teaches you to live without guarantees and yet without fear. That is maturity. There was a woman facing a major relocation. She feared leaving familiarity. She feared regret. I asked her, if you trusted completely, what would you do? Her answer came softly, I would move. She released the need for absolute assurance and chose based on peace rather than fear. The move transformed her life. Trust does not remove risk. It transforms how you walk through it. You begin to move not from panic, but from alignment. Alignment feels like quiet conviction, not loud emotion, not dramatic signs, just steady knowing. When you release something fully, you may notice something surprising. Your desire itself becomes gentler. It no longer screams, it whispers, and whispered desires are easier to fulfill because they are not tangled in tension. The universe responds to coherence. When your thought, emotion, and belief align in calm expectancy, you become coherent. Coherence amplifies manifestation. You may have noticed that sometimes the moment you stop chasing something, it appears. You stop trying so hard to impress, and people are drawn to you. You stop forcing solutions, and answers emerge. This is not coincidence. It is the law of non-resistance. The harder you push against life, the harder it feels. The more you cooperate, the smoother it flows. Release is cooperation. There is a sacred strength in saying, if this is meant for me, it will remain. That sentence alone dissolves anxiety, because it shifts focus from control to trust. There was a man deeply attached to a particular career path. When that path collapsed unexpectedly, he felt shattered. He believed his identity was destroyed, but over time, through surrender, he discovered gifts he had ignored for years. Those gifts led him into a field far more fulfilling. Years later, he admitted, the collapse was the best thing that ever happened to me. At the time, it felt like loss. In hindsight, it was redirection. Surrender allows hindsight to become gratitude. There is a reason peace feels so powerful. Peace is alignment with divine order. When you feel peaceful about something, even without external evidence, it is often confirmation that you are aligned. When you feel frantic, it is often resistance. Listen to that signal. Let peace guide you more than fear. And if peace feels distant, release until it returns. Sometimes you must release the same worry dozens of times in a single day. That is fine. Each release weakens the pattern. Eventually, the pattern dissolves, and you discover that what once dominated your mind now barely whispers. This is freedom. Freedom from obsession. Freedom from internal chaos. And freedom is fertile ground for miracles. Because miracles require space. Space in the mind. Space in the heart. Space in expectation. Release creates space. I want you to imagine yourself months from now lighter, calmer, clearer. The burden that once consumed you no longer feels overwhelming. The outcome you feared either resolved peacefully or transformed into something better. And you look back and realize that the turning point was not when circumstances shifted. It was when you did. When you stopped fighting. When you chose to trust. When you placed the weight down. That moment, that quiet, private decision was the beginning. The moment you let go, miracles started. Not because you demanded them, not because you earned them, but because you allowed them. Allowing is sacred. Allowing is courageous. Allowing is faith in motion. So whatever you are facing now, release it again. Even if you released it yesterday. Even if you released it an hour ago. Release it now. Breathe deeply. Say quietly, I trust, and let that trust carry you forward into a life no longer driven by fear, but guided by divine intelligence. Miracles are not reserved for the few. They are natural outcomes for those who stop resisting the flow of grace. Release it, and step into that flow. And now, let us speak about what happens after the release, after the prayer, after the surrender, after the quiet decision to trust. There is often a silence, a stillness. Nothing dramatic seems to occur immediately. This is the sacred pause, and many people misinterpret it. They think the silence means nothing is happening. They assume the stillness is emptiness, but the sacred pause is not emptiness, it is orchestration. When a seed is planted, the soil above remains unchanged for a time. No visible movement, no green shoot breaking through. Yet beneath the surface, roots are forming, structure is strengthening, life is organizing. If you dig up the soil daily to check progress, you interrupt growth. So it is with surrender. After you release something to God, there may be days where nothing appears different. Resist the temptation to reclaim the burden. Resist the urge to take it back, because you cannot see evidence. Faith matures in silence. There was a man who once told me, "I surrendered my situation, but nothing happened." I asked him, "How long did you wait?" He replied, 3 days. 3 days. He expected visible transformation immediately. But divine order considers more than your impatience. It considers alignment, readiness, unseen coordination. The sacred pause is often the period where pieces are rearranging beyond your sight. Trust during this time is powerful, because this is where most people break. They release, then panic returns, and they grip again. Release, then doubt, and they reclaim the problem. And so the cycle continues. But if you remain steady, if you let the sacred pause exist without interference, something profound unfolds. You begin to detach from urgency. Urgency creates distortion, steadiness invites clarity, and clarity attracts opportunity. Let me share another truth. Sometimes, after surrender, the very thing you released intensifies briefly. This is not punishment. It is surfacing. When you release fear, sometimes fear rises one last time. When you release resentment, sometimes old memories resurface. This is the subconscious clearing itself. Do not mistake temporary surfacing for failure. It is purification. Stay calm, stay surrendered. The wave will pass. There was a woman who released her anxiety about finances. For weeks she felt peace. Then unexpectedly an expense arose. Her old fear returned instantly. She almost reclaimed the burden. But instead she paused. She said, "Even this is within divine order. I remain calm." That single decision prevented her from spiraling. Within days, an unexpected opportunity covered the expense entirely. If she had reacted with panic, she might have missed it. Your reaction during challenge matters more than the challenge itself. Release teaches you how to respond rather than react. There is also this beautiful shift that occurs over time. The more you practice surrender, the less you experience life as random. You begin noticing patterns of provision, moments when help arrived just in time, times when what seemed like loss revealed hidden blessing, and your memory becomes a reservoir of trust. You remember past deliverance, you recall previous redirection. That memory strengthens present faith. It becomes easier to release because you have evidence of divine intelligence already at work in your life. Faith grows through reflection. Consider your own past. How many times did something that once terrified you eventually resolve? How many delays later revealed purpose? How many disappointments redirected you toward growth? You survived every previous fear. Why assume this one is different? Release invites you to live from accumulated trust rather than immediate panic. There is a maturity that comes when you no longer need to understand every detail. You accept that some answers will reveal themselves later, and that acceptance liberates you from mental exhaustion. Mental exhaustion often comes from demanding answers prematurely. But timing matters. Divine intelligence reveals solutions when you are ready to recognize them, not before. I once counseled a man desperate to understand why a relationship ended abruptly. He replayed every conversation, searching for explanation. I told him, "Release the need to know right now." Months later, he discovered information that clarified everything. Information unavailable at the time of his suffering. Had he known earlier, it would not have changed the outcome. The clarity came when it was useful. Release frees you from obsessive analysis. Some answers belong to the future. Peace belongs to the present. You must choose which you prioritize. There is also the subtle miracle of detachment. When you release, you no longer measure your worth by results. If something succeeds, you are grateful. If something fails, you remain grounded. This emotional stability creates resilience. Resilience invites expansion. People trust those who remain steady under pressure. Opportunity gravitates toward calm leadership. Surrender strengthens your leadership over your own life. Another dimension of release is this: it dissolves the illusion that you must earn love through struggle. Many people subconsciously believe that blessing requires exhaustion, that reward requires suffering, but divine love is not transactional. It flows freely. You do not have to prove yourself worthy of peace. You simply choose it. Release that belief. Release the need to earn grace. Grace is given. There was a man who believed success required constant stress. If he felt relaxed, he assumed he was failing. His nervous system never rested. Eventually, his health deteriorated. Only when he released the belief that stress equals productivity did his body begin to recover. Calm does not weaken achievement. It strengthens it. When your nervous system is balanced, your decisions improve. Improved decisions generate sustainable success. Release is not the abandonment of ambition. It is the purification of it. Ambition guided by trust is powerful. Ambition driven by fear is corrosive. Ask yourself honestly, is your striving rooted in joy or in insecurity? If insecurity, release it. Joy produces creativity. Insecurity produces compulsion. Release clears the foundation, and from that clean foundation, your desires evolve. Interestingly, after deep surrender, some desires fade. Not because they were denied, but because they were never truly aligned. You realize you were chasing something out of fear or comparison. Release reveals authenticity. You begin to want what genuinely fulfills you, not what impresses others. And authentic desires manifest more smoothly because they are congruent with your nature. There is little resistance when you pursue what aligns with your soul. Congruence accelerates manifestation. Release uncovers congruence. You also discover that miracles are not always grand. Sometimes they are subtle shifts in perspective. The courage to say no, the clarity to walk away, the peace to stay. These are miracles too. They alter your life trajectory quietly but powerfully. There is something deeply transformative about waking each day with this posture. Whatever comes, I trust. It removes the edge from uncertainty. It dissolves dread. It creates spaciousness, and in spaciousness, intuition speaks clearly. Intuition is divine guidance filtered through your inner awareness. But fear drowns it. Release amplifies it. You may begin noticing that decisions feel easier, not because choices disappear, but because you no longer approach them from panic. You weigh options calmly, you listen inwardly, you choose without overthinking, and that calm decisiveness creates momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence reinforces trust. Trust deepens surrender. It becomes a virtuous cycle. Contrast that with the cycle of fear. Fear leads to control. Control leads to tension. Tension clouds judgment. Clouded judgment creates mistakes. Mistakes reinforce fear. Surrender interrupts that cycle. It replaces it with peace. And peace is productive. There is a final truth I want you to embrace fully. You were never meant to carry life by yourself. You were meant to participate in it, to collaborate with divine intelligence, to act when guided, to rest when uncertain, to trust when unclear, to release when overwhelmed. This rhythm is natural. Children trust instinctively. They release quickly. They cry and then they play. Adults cling. They replay pain. They anticipate disaster. Surrender restores childlike trust without childish irresponsibility. It combines wisdom with innocence. You remain thoughtful. You remain proactive. But you are no longer burdened by the illusion that everything depends on your mental control. Everything does not depend on you. It never did. That realization is freeing. Imagine the weight lifting when you truly accept that divine intelligence is active in your life right now. Not someday, now. Working through unseen channels, aligning circumstances quietly, preparing outcomes patiently, all while you learn to trust. The moment you let go, miracles start. Not because God begins caring at that moment, but because you stop resisting the care that was always there. Release it again, even if you have released it 100 times. Release it gently. Release it sincerely. Release it completely. And step forward in the quiet assurance that you are guided, sustained, and supported. Peace is not a distant reward. It is the first miracle of surrender, and from that peace everything else unfolds. And now, let us speak about what your life begins to look like when surrender is no longer something you practice only in crisis, but something you embody daily. There is a noticeable shift. You move more slowly, yet accomplish more. You speak more softly, yet are heard more clearly. You plan wisely, yet are not disturbed when plans change. This is not passivity, it is poise. Poise is the visible evidence of inward trust. You will find that when you no longer cling to specific outcomes, you become surprisingly bold. Because boldness no longer feels dangerous. If you trust divine order, you are less afraid to step forward. There was a man who had postponed launching his project for years because he feared failure. He waited for the perfect conditions, the perfect timing, the perfect guarantee. Finally, in a quiet moment of surrender, he said, "If this succeeds, I am grateful. If it fails, I am still guided." That release dissolved paralysis. He moved forward not with frantic energy, but with grounded confidence. And interestingly, because he was no longer desperate for success, he executed with clarity and patience. The project flourished. Release removed the pressure that had been suffocating his potential. Sometimes the obstacle is not the world. It is the tension within you. When that tension dissolves, energy becomes available. Creativity increases. Decision-making sharpens. Even your physical posture changes. You stand straighter not from pride, but from peace. There is something magnetic about someone who is not chasing approval. When you release the need to be validated, people sense authenticity. Authenticity builds trust. Trust builds influence. Influence creates opportunity. And it all begins with surrender. You may notice that as you practice release, you argue less. You defend yourself less. You prove yourself less. Because you understand that divine order does not require constant justification. There was a woman who constantly felt misunderstood at work. She spent enormous energy trying to correct others' perceptions. After practicing surrender, she began focusing instead on her integrity rather than her image. She released the need to control how she was seen. Over time, her consistent behavior reshaped perception naturally. The need to defend dissolved. Peace replaced defensiveness. Release removes the exhausting burden of reputation management. Truth sustains itself. Another transformation occurs quietly. You begin to experience gratitude even in uncertainty. Not forced gratitude, not superficial positivity, but sincere appreciation that life is unfolding in ways you cannot yet fully see. Gratitude during uncertainty is powerful. It signals trust, and trust amplifies alignment. There is also a profound calm that emerges when you stop measuring time anxiously. When you release your timeline, days feel less pressured. You stop scanning constantly for signs of arrival. You begin to live fully in the present chapter. And ironically, when you stop rushing the future, it often approaches faster, because you are no longer resisting it. Resistance creates delay. Flow accelerates movement. Have you ever noticed how time feels slower when you are anxious, and faster when you are relaxed? Surrender alters your experience of time itself. Waiting feels less like deprivation and more like preparation, and in preparation, growth occurs. There is another subtle miracle of surrender. You begin attracting people who operate from a similar calm, because energy recognizes energy. Anxious minds attract chaos. Peaceful minds attract stability. When you release, you raise the quality of your relational field. Conversations become deeper. Partnerships become more harmonious. Conflict decreases, because you are no longer reacting from fear. There was a man who frequently argued with his spouse about finances. Every disagreement escalated because both were defending their fears. After practicing release, he stopped entering conversations with urgency. He listened instead of interrupting. He responded instead of reacting. The tone of their discussions shifted. Financial solutions emerged not because income changed immediately, but because hostility dissolved. Peace made room for collaboration. Release improves communication. Communication improves results. You may also find that your body responds positively to surrender. Sleep deepens. Breathing slows. Tension reduces. The body thrives in safety. When you release fear, you signal safety, and safety is healing. The nervous system cannot repair itself while under constant perceived threat. Surrender reduces perceived threat. Healing follows. There are individuals who have held onto resentment for years. They replay grievances as if preserving them maintains control. But resentment is a form of attachment. When they finally release forgiveness, something shifts physically. Headaches lessen. Blood pressure stabilizes. Energy returns. Release liberates both mind and body. It is not merely spiritual, it is physiological. There is also the realization that when you surrender, you become more discerning. You stop chasing every opportunity. You no longer feel compelled to say yes to everything. You choose from peace rather than pressure, and peace-based choices are sustainable. There was a young woman who felt obligated to accept every invitation, every responsibility, every request. She feared disappointing others. Eventually, she surrendered that fear. She realized that saying no did not diminish her worth. Her life simplified, energy returned, and the commitments she did accept flourished. Release refines focus. Focus multiplies effectiveness. The more you release fear of scarcity, the more abundant you feel. Abundance is not only financial. It is mental space, emotional availability, spiritual steadiness. When you release comparison, you feel abundant. When you release competition driven by insecurity, you feel abundant. And abundance attracts abundance. It is not mystical exaggeration. It is psychological coherence. When your inner narrative shifts from "I lack" to "I am provided for," your behavior shifts accordingly. You take wiser risks. You recognize opportunity. You maintain confidence. Confidence influences outcomes. The chain always begins within. Let us also acknowledge this truth. Surrender does not eliminate all discomfort. Life will still present challenges, but your relationship with challenge transforms. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "How is this shaping me?" That shift alone dissolves victimhood. Victimhood drains power. Ownership restores it. Surrender does not make you passive. It makes you powerful in a different way. Power through alignment rather than domination. Domination exhausts. Alignment sustains. You may notice that your reactions shorten. Where once you spiraled for days, now you recover in minutes. Where once you obsessed for weeks, now you release in moments. That shortening of suffering is a miracle in itself, because it restores time and energy. Energy that can be directed toward creation instead of rumination. Imagine how much of your life has been spent replaying fear. Now imagine reclaiming that energy. What could you build? What could you explore? What could you heal? Release frees creative power. Creative power builds new realities. There is a beautiful paradox in surrender. The more you trust that what is meant for you cannot miss you, the less you cling. And the less you cling, the more naturally what belongs to you arrives. You stop chasing. You start receiving. Receiving is receptive, not desperate. It is confident. There was a woman who desperately wanted recognition in her career. She constantly compared herself to peers. Her work suffered under the weight of insecurity. After practicing surrender, she focused on mastery instead of applause. Recognition followed organically, because excellence flourishes in calm. Desperation suffocates it. Release clears the suffocation. Perhaps the greatest evidence of surrender is this: you no longer need to force your story to match others. You accept your journey as uniquely guided. Comparison fades. Peace increases. And in that peace, your individuality shines. That authenticity is magnetic. When you no longer seek to impress, you begin to inspire. And inspiration is far more powerful than imitation. Let us also consider this. The moment you release something to God, you also release your fear of losing it. Fear of loss is often what creates attachment. But when you say, "If this remains, I am grateful. If it leaves, I am still supported," you free yourself. Freedom feels expansive. Expansiveness attracts growth. There is nothing more powerful than a person who knows they are sustained regardless of outcome. That knowledge produces quiet confidence, and quiet confidence opens doors. The moment you let go, miracles start. But sometimes the miracle is you becoming calmer, you becoming wiser, you becoming less reactive, you becoming more grounded. That internal miracle precedes every external one, because the outer world mirrors the inner state. If you carry fear, you perceive threat. If you carry trust, you perceive opportunity. Perception shapes choice. Choice shapes outcome. It is all connected. Release is the pivot point. Tonight, before you rest, place your heaviest concern in divine hands once more. Not as ritual, not as performance, but as decision. Feel the shift. Notice the softening. Allow yourself to breathe fully without tension, and trust that unseen coordination has already begun. You may not know how, you may not know when, but you know this: you are not alone, you are not unsupported, you are not responsible for orchestrating the entire universe. Your task is alignment, And alignment begins with surrender. Release it to God. Let go fully. And watch as life rearranges itself gently, steadily, faithfully into something greater than your fear ever allowed you to imagine. This is the quiet power of letting go. This is the steady rhythm of miracles. And this rhythm continues, not just today, not just once, but for the rest of a life lived in trust. And now, as we come to the deepest layer of this truth, I want you to understand something that may change the way you see every difficulty from this day forward. Surrender is not the end of your strength. It is the purification of it. There is a kind of strength that strains, that forces, that pushes against the world in constant resistance. That strength exhausts the body and clouds the mind. And then there is a strength that stands quietly, rooted in trust. A strength that does not need to shout. A strength that does not tremble when circumstances shift. That strength is born of surrender. When you release something to God completely, you are not collapsing, you are standing in a different way. You are choosing stability over strain. Think of a tree in a storm. The rigid branches snap, the flexible ones bend and survive. Surrender is flexibility. Flexibility is resilience. Resilience sustains you through storms that once would have shattered you. You begin to notice that your fears lose their grip more quickly. Thoughts that once consumed you now pass through with less intensity. Where there was once obsession, there is now perspective. Where there was once dread, there is now curiosity. You may even begin to welcome uncertainty, not because you enjoy discomfort, but because you trust the unseen architecture behind it. There was a woman who once told me that her greatest fear was losing control of her life. And yet, when she examined her history honestly, she realized that every major turning point had occurred when her plans collapsed. The job she thought she needed disappeared and led her to her true vocation. The relationship she fought to preserve ended and opened her to deeper love. The city she resisted leaving became the place where she grew the most. In every case, what she feared had been a doorway. When she recognized that pattern, something inside her relaxed. She stopped fearing change. She began trusting it. Surrender transforms change from enemy to guide. There is another subtle transformation that occurs when you release consistently. You stop asking, "How do I fix this?" and begin asking, "How is this guiding me?" That question shifts your orientation. Fixing assumes something is broken beyond purpose. Guiding assumes there is intelligence at work. When you live from the second question, you move differently. You listen more, you force less, you respond instead of react. There is tremendous power in responding consciously. Reaction is automatic and fear-based. Response is deliberate and trust-based. Surrender strengthens your ability to respond. You may find that even your prayers change. Instead of pleading, they become conversations. Instead of demands, they become declarations of trust. Instead of anxiety, they become gratitude. Thank you for what is unfolding, even if I cannot see it. That kind of prayer reshapes your subconscious profoundly, because gratitude implies confidence. Confidence signals alignment. Alignment activates order. Let us also speak of the courage it takes to release. It is easy to say the words. It is harder to mean them. True surrender requires vulnerability. It requires admitting that you do not have all the answers. But there is freedom in that admission. You were never meant to have all the answers. You were meant to walk with guidance. There was a man who once carried the belief that if he trusted too much, he would be disappointed. So he prepared for disappointment constantly. But by preparing for disappointment, he lived in perpetual tension. When he finally risked trust, he discovered something unexpected. Even when outcomes were not perfect, he handled them better. Trust did not eliminate challenge. It strengthened his response to it. You see, surrender does not guarantee that life will unfold exactly as you desire. It guarantees that whatever unfolds will be met with grace rather than panic. Grace changes everything. When grace meets difficulty, wisdom emerges. When panic meets difficulty, chaos multiplies. Which do you prefer? You must decide daily. Surrender is not a single event. It is a posture. And postures become habits. Habits become character. Character shapes destiny. If your habit is control, your destiny feels heavy. If your habit is trust, your destiny feels guided. There is a powerful realization that comes when you practice surrender long enough. You begin to notice that even when things do not go your way, they go in a way, and that way often reveals itself as better suited to your growth. You stop interpreting every deviation from your plan as failure. You begin interpreting it as refinement. Refinement is not punishment, it is preparation. Perhaps the very thing you are trying to force into existence is not aligned with your highest good. But your fear keeps you clinging to it. When you release it, you make space for something more aligned. Alignment feels different from excitement. Excitement is loud and urgent. Alignment is steady and calm. Learn to recognize that calm certainty. It is often the voice of divine intelligence guiding you. There is something extraordinary about living without the constant internal demand for certainty. When you release the need to know every outcome, you free your mind for creativity. You begin to explore rather than calculate, to experiment rather than obsess, and exploration opens doors that calculation never sees. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history occurred not through rigid control, but through openness to the unexpected. Openness is surrender in motion. Imagine living each day with this quiet confidence. I am guided, not as arrogance, not as denial of challenge, but as steady assurance. That assurance changes how you enter rooms, how you speak in meetings, how you approach relationships. It removes the desperate edge from your voice, and people respond differently to that energy. They feel safe around calm certainty, and safety fosters cooperation. Cooperation fosters success, all of it rooted in surrender. There is also the miracle of emotional freedom. When you release attachment to outcomes, you free yourself from constant emotional swings. You are not elated one moment and devastated the next. You remain balanced. Balance sustains health. Balance strengthens clarity. Balance multiplies longevity. It is not dramatic, it is powerful. Perhaps the most profound realization of all is this: you do not lose control when you surrender. You gain peace, and peace is more valuable than control ever was. Control was always limited. Peace is expansive. Control was always fragile. Peace is resilient. Control demanded constant vigilance. Peace allows rest. Rest restores strength. Strength built on rest endures. So tonight, before you close your eyes, I invite you to consider this. What have you been gripping so tightly that your hands are tired? What outcome have you rehearsed so often that your mind is weary? What fear have you nurtured so persistently that your heart feels heavy? Now imagine placing that weight down, not because you are giving up, but because you are choosing partnership with divine order. Feel your shoulders soften. Feel your breath deepen. Feel the quiet assurance that you are supported. That assurance is not fantasy. It is alignment. And alignment is the birthplace of miracles. The moment you let go, miracles start. They may begin invisibly, they may unfold gradually, but they begin because resistance ends, because flow resumes, because divine intelligence moves freely when you stop interfering. Trust that movement. Rest in that current. And let your life become a testimony not of struggle but of surrender, not of force but of faith, not of fear but of freedom. Release it to God, and walk forward lighter than you have been in years. For you are guided, you are sustained, and the miracle is already in motion. And now, let us speak of what happens months from now when you look back, because one day you will. You will look back at this season, the anxiety, the waiting, the uncertainty, and you will see it differently. You will see the moment you stopped fighting. You will remember the night you finally said, and you will realize that everything shifted from there. Not all at once. Not dramatically, but steadily, quietly, irreversibly. You will see how the panic that once consumed your mornings began to loosen its grip. You will notice how the conversations that once triggered you no longer had the same power. You will remember how you once lay awake rehearsing disaster, and how that eventually turned into peaceful sleep. The miracle did not begin when circumstances changed. It began when you did. And here is something even deeper. As surrender becomes natural to you, you begin to trust yourself more, because you see that you can handle uncertainty without collapsing. You see that you can walk through unknown territory without constant reassurance. You see that your stability does not depend on outcomes. That realization builds a quiet confidence no achievement can give you, because it is internal, and what is internal cannot be taken from you. There is a level of spiritual maturity that emerges when surrender is no longer difficult, when release becomes your reflex, when your first instinct in chaos is not panic but pause. That pause is sacred. Inside it, wisdom lives. Inside it, intuition speaks. Inside it, fear loses its volume. I have seen people transform their entire lives through this one practice, not because they forced results, not because they manipulated circumstances, but because they stopped resisting what divine intelligence was already arranging. You begin to notice that life feels less combative, less adversarial, less exhausting, not because you have fewer responsibilities, but because you are no longer carrying them alone. You begin to sense that something larger is involved in your journey, not abstractly, not philosophically, but tangibly. You notice how solutions appear at the right moment, how people show up unexpectedly, how ideas surface just when needed, and instead of calling it coincidence, you recognize it as cooperation, divine cooperation. You are not separate from the source of wisdom, you are connected to it. But connection requires openness, and openness requires surrender. There is something deeply liberating about no longer needing to control how you are perceived, how quickly things happen, how perfectly events unfold. You release the need for perfection. You release the need for immediate validation. You release the need for guarantees. And in that release, something remarkable happens. You begin to enjoy your life, not someday, not after the breakthrough, but now, because peace is no longer postponed. Peace becomes your foundation. From that foundation, miracles feel natural. And sometimes you will catch yourself smiling at the realization that what once terrified you now barely concerns you. That what once dominated your thoughts now passes quietly. That what once felt urgent now feels manageable. This is growth through surrender. This is strength born of trust. And it does not make you passive, it makes you powerful in a way that force never could. Force exhausts. Trust sustains. Force isolates. Trust connects, force tightens, trust expands. You may even begin to notice that the more you release, the more intuitive you become. You sense when to act. You sense when to wait. You sense when to speak. You sense when to remain silent. And these instincts feel natural, not strained, because you are no longer clouded by fear. You are aligned. Alignment sharpens perception, and perception shapes destiny. Let me say something clearly. Surrender does not mean you stop working. It means you stop worrying while working. It means you do what you can and release what you cannot. It means you take action, but without anxiety attached to it. This kind of action is clean, focused, effective, and sustainable. There is no frantic energy behind it. There is no desperation pushing it. It flows from calm intention. That flow is powerful, and over time, you will see the evidence. Not always in the form you expected, but in ways that fit you better than you imagined. Perhaps the relationship you wanted transforms into something healthier. Perhaps the job you feared losing opens the door to a calling you never considered. Perhaps the illness that frightened you becomes the catalyst for a lifestyle that restores vitality. Divine intelligence does not always deliver what you ask for. It delivers what aligns, and alignment is wiser than insistence. The moment you stop insisting, you start receiving. Receiving requires openness, and openness requires letting go. You may find that surrender softens you in beautiful ways. You become less harsh with yourself, less critical of others, less reactive to small inconveniences. Because you are no longer operating from fear of collapse, you trust stability beyond circumstance. And when trust becomes your baseline, life feels lighter. Even serious challenges feel different, not trivial, but navigable. You do not collapse under them. You stand within them. That standing is grace. There is something sacred about choosing peace when chaos would be easier. It is easy to join panic. It is courageous to remain calm. And that courage becomes your testimony. Others will notice. They may not know what changed, but they will sense it. They will feel your steadiness. And your steadiness may inspire theirs. Surrender is contagious. Peace spreads. Calm influences environments. One surrendered person can alter the emotional climate of an entire room. You may begin to realize that miracles are not only external events, they are internal revolutions. The revolution from fear to trust, from tension to release, from control to cooperation. That revolution changes everything. And once you taste that freedom, you will never want to return to the old way. You will see how heavy control truly was, how exhausting constant vigilance felt, how draining overanalysis became, and you will choose differently, again and again. Because peace is addictive in the most beautiful way. It restores, it heals, it clarifies, it empowers, and from that empowerment, life expands. So wherever you are right now, whether in waiting, in uncertainty, in transition, or in challenge, remember this. The moment you let go, miracles start, not because you finally convinced God to act, but because you stopped blocking what was already in motion. Release the grip, relax the mind, trust the process, and allow divine intelligence to complete what your fear never could. You are guided, you are sustained, you are supported, even now, especially now. Release it to God and step forward with the quiet confidence that your life is unfolding with wisdom far beyond your limited view. That is not wishful thinking, it is alignment, and alignment is where miracles live. And now let this be the final truth you carry with you. There will always be something you could worry about. There will always be a future scenario your mind can rehearse. There will always be an outcome you cannot fully control. But there will also always be this choice here. Trust or tension. You cannot hold both at the same time. You cannot cling and release simultaneously. You cannot force and flow in the same breath. So tonight, not theoretically, not philosophically, but personally choose. Choose to loosen your grip. Choose to surrender the timeline. Choose to stop negotiating with fear. Because the life you are trying to force into existence is already being arranged at a level deeper than your conscious planning. There is an intelligence that sees what you cannot, that knows who you will meet, that knows which door must close to guide you to the right one, that understands what you are becoming, even when you only see what you are losing. You do not have to understand the entire path to walk it. You only need enough trust for the next step. And that trust grows each time you release instead of resist. Each time you breathe instead of brace. Each time you say, I give this to you, and mean it. One day you will stand in a reality that once felt impossible. And you will not say, I forced this into being. You will say, this unfolded. You will recognize that the very delay you resented refined you. That the very uncertainty you feared strengthened you. That the very surrender you resisted saved you from outcomes too small for your destiny. Because surrender does not shrink your life. It expands it beyond what your fear would have settled for. There is something profoundly beautiful about a person who trusts. Their eyes are softer. Their voice is steadier. Their presence is calming. They do not chase. They do not grasp. They move with quiet confidence. That confidence does not come from guarantees. It comes from alignment, and alignment makes miracles feel natural. So if you remember nothing else, remember this. The moment you let go, miracles start. Not always loudly, not always instantly, but inevitably, because the flow of divine order was never blocked by lack of power. It was only blocked by your resistance. And now you are releasing it. You are choosing cooperation over control, faith over fear, flow over force. Let that be your new posture. Let that be your new habit. Let that be your new identity. You are not a struggler. You are not abandoned. You are not alone in your effort. You are supported by intelligence that governs galaxies and breathes life into your lungs without your instruction. If it can orchestrate the movement of stars, it can certainly orchestrate your circumstances. If it can heal wounds in your body without conscious effort, it can heal situations beyond your sight. Trust that, rest in that, walk in that. And when anxiety tries to return, because it will attempt to, simply release again. Surrender is not a one-time act, it is a lifestyle, and the more you live it, the more peaceful you become. The more peaceful you become, the clearer you think. The clearer you think, the wiser you act. The wiser you act, the more effortlessly your life unfolds. This is not weakness. This is mastery, mastery of your inner world. And mastery of the inner world always precedes transformation in the outer one. So go forward lighter, go forward calmer, go forward knowing that what is meant for you does not require panic to obtain. It requires alignment, and you are aligning now. Release it to God, and let your life become living proof that when a soul stops fighting divine order begins to move visibly on its behalf. Peace is yours, provision is yours, guidance is yours, not someday, not eventually. Now, trust it completely and watch what unfolds.